Sorry, I couldn't get into my Zoom account, so I'm doing it through the browser, and then I'm trying to learn. It works differently. Okay. So welcome to this first official meeting of for the Fall Town Special Town Meeting. We are still holding meetings via Zoom. So I guess that's pretty much everything. Blythe, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Do you want to go through the warrant and take up those things as they come up, or would you like to focus on? Okay.
Yeah, if you want to just start, obviously skip the ones that, don't pertain to you at all, but.
Sure. So we're down to 13 articles from 15. We eliminated 2 talking since we met last. Not ready to do the codification yet. And it's our recommendation that we handle a transfer of monies into stabilization through the transfer article. So we eliminated that one as well. Jay seemed to think we didn't need the reports to committees, which is, I think, Article 5. So we could possibly get down to 12. But starting at the top, Article 1 is always for prior unpaid bills. We don't plan to have any. Todd, anything that you're aware of that may come up at this point, or are we good?
Not as of yet, but that doesn't mean that there might not be one that comes along.
Right. So right now it looks like we'll be just passing over that, but we'll leave it on for now. In terms of transfers, I sent, I think you all should have the list. It's an Excel spreadsheet of 3 pages, and I can bring them up on my screen if Erica isn't able to. Erica, can you do that?
Yep, just give me a minute. I have 2 screens going right now, so I'm not positive which one will show up on the Zoom, but
Okay.
Let me see if I can do that.
So while you're looking for that, I'll just give a high level. So right now we've got a transfer total of $335,400. The lion's share of that is a transfer into the OPEB trust fund, as we're continuing to sock away some dollars in there each year to start to grow that. And then a larger amount, $200,000, would be to go into stabilization. We received our free cash certification earlier this week, and it is significantly higher than it has been in recent years. It's just over $3 million. And so this year seemed a very appropriate time to make a transfer into that fund. For those who don't follow acronyms as closely as us finance folks do, that stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. And that is the town's obligation to pay for retiree health insurance for any employees who are pension eligible and entitled to that benefit that the town adopted a number of years ago. So I know Todd knows the actuarial figure. It's in the multi-millions. This is a small amount, but we're trying to grow what we insert in there every year, and we're recommending 100,000. Stabilization is the town's, if you want to call it, excellent. Thank you. Perfect, Erica. That's just what I was hoping for. So stabilization is the town's rainy day fund, if you will, where the town can, through town meeting, make a deposit into this fund for emergencies or unforeseen things that may come up in a future year. It's the goal of the rating agencies, bonding agencies, that you have at least 5% in the fund. We haven't made a contribution in a few years, and so as the budget grows, that has dropped a little bit. I know Todd has those numbers at the tip of his fingers. Before we knew the free cash amount, we were recommending $200,000. Todd, do you want to update people on where that stands and what we probably should put into it?
Sure. So currently the balance in the stabilization fund is $1,816,000. And typically TLS gives a guideline, especially when you're trying to kind of keep things reasonable, which also helps out for bonding purposes, keeping your bond rating up to have these reserves in place. And typically the DLS best practice says it should have about 5% of your annualized budget. Our annualized budget being $44,804,000, 5% would be about 2.2. So we're off about $300,000, $400,000. And to tighten that up, obviously putting the 200,000 gets us closer, keeps us on track at being close to the 5% that we should be at.
So we haven't gone over this detail with the select board yet. I'm going to do that next week, but this is our initial target. And then the other items are much smaller. We budgeted, taking the third line, we budgeted in the fire department operating budget for replacement of PPE, which is the turnout gear for each firefighter. It has a definite lifespan after which it can't be used. We really needed to be budgeting 16,000. We only had 5, so we wanted to add to that for 11. The next item is hose. The department has won a federal grant to replace a lot of its hose, and it requires a 5% match for that grant of about 27,000. So this is the balance of that. They also very much need a new thermal imaging camera. So we actually need 2, but we're suggesting 1 for a transfer of 13,000. And then the last item, we just completed a full review of all of our town buildings in terms of their compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We did that through a state grant we received this past year, and have identified almost $2 million in changes that the town needs to consider over a number of years. The highest priority ones are about 210,000. The highest priorities being ones where entrances into buildings to help people get into our public buildings are the most critical. And some of them are very simple to do and we can change ourselves. Others we probably need to design and put out to bid and have done by an outside contractor. And so we're looking to put some monies aside to be able to do that design work so we can go after another state grant. They give grants out of about as much as $250,000 a year. Be shovel ready, if you will, to go out to bid and show the state that we're serious about this by spending a little of our own money to have them provide the balance to get that initial work done.
Blythe, this is Kristen. Are there any areas they discovered that were non-compliant that we would need to do sooner rather than later, just from a compliance perspective, or are they all kind of optional?
So there's a new report right on our website you can take a look at, and it breaks it down into 4 or 5 priority areas. And I know Matt knows how many there are if I forget. Priority 1 is getting people into the building. So are the parking spaces the right location and width and signs and paint color for the blue emblem? Are the walkways and the doorways into the building to help people get into the building compliant? Matt, let me call on you. Isn't Olive Day where most of those issues are for us? I mean, there are some in every building, but isn't that one of the more significant ones?
Olive Day is the most significant in the town from the building's age and the amount of people going into the building. That is the one that most need right now.
Yeah. So, like I say, we want to tackle those first. You know, if DPW can repaint some parking lot lines and put up a couple of signs, that's great. But some of the things, the ramps are just deteriorated because they're old, or maybe they're not quite at the right pitch. Some of them are not easy for us to do, require a prevailing wage work to do work to a building. And so we want to use a little bit of the town's money to chase down the state grant to tackle those first. And then over time, and hopefully through other grants and some of our own money, honestly, work on tackling some of the others. I mean, it's a big topic, and the select board covered it at their last meeting. So rather than, we can go into it in more detail, but if you want a deeper dive, that's probably a great place to look, is that tape.
Great. Thank you.
So I know the chief's on the line if anyone has any questions about any of the fire department stuff.
Maybe not fire department, but around the bond rating and the stabilization fund, as well as the retirement, the funding the liabilities on the retirement fund. This was also driven by bond rating. Are these? I think I ask this every time it comes up, but like, is there something that, are there targets that were are there hard and fast connections between hitting the targets and where we need to be in like the funding? Like, is there a plan to, it's like, okay, this, we have to do it to this level or we're going to start losing bond rating? Can you draw that connection, Todd, or is it more how we feel we can do it?
Bond rating is not just one component. There's multiple components. One of them being the stabilization fund, which is, again, best guide practice is to keep that around 5%. And again, that's one factor. Yeah, I think your bigger concern is the OPEB funding, to say, okay, we have a $26 million liability. How are we going to handle that with only putting $100,000 towards it? I know Susan Klein indicates to that, it's just a drop in the puddle, or the lake, I should say. Yes, we're making strides to that. And obviously, as we keep going forward, we're going to keep contributing more monies towards it, which will help to offset it. Another component for the OPEB funding, in order to bring that a little bit down, as we've talked in the past, is to potentially make up a differential, because right now retirees are contributing only 35%, just an additional 5% contribution from them brings the liability down $2 million. So there are tactics we can do. We haven't implemented them. We're always looking at them. So as far as a hard and fast rule, no, there's not really a hard and fast. There's a bunch of guidelines. There's a bunch of help that we have, both through our advisor with Odyssey, who helps us with the OPEB calculations, giving us advice as far as different health plans to have available, because depending on how your health plans are set up also dictates what the actual contribution is going to be going long term. So, again, it's not just one item that contributes to all this, but yes, we are taking into consideration all those factors. Hopefully it helps and addresses your concerns. If you have further concerns, let me know.
Well, I'm really curious about the decision making. We have some monies. You're making a recommendation that that is short of what the target is. Is there a consequence? I'm just curious about what's driving the decision making for these levels. Like, is there a bottom where we go like, okay, we know that but last time we talked about it is like, if we don't do anything around the retiree plan funding, we needed to show effort, right?
And that's what we're doing with this effort. What happens is the OPEB funding is set up and goes in a separate trust. So this separate trust is then utilized to help offset those amounts that are contributing there, which is also a component in the overall OPEB calculation. So yes, it does help out.
And I would add to that I think in the future there's no requirement that we get to a certain level of funding yet, but if you listen to enough financial advisors, they will tell you that sooner or later, that's probably going to become a requirement. So the fact that we've started and we're slowly increasing it is going to look good in case, to our bondholders if we, when we go for our next issue, that we are addressing it. We have a trust, we are planning it. And I think that's important. I mean, right now, we are covering all the costs of the retirees in the operating budget. We're not charging it to the trust right now. But as more employees retire and they are replaced in kind, that's where it really starts to grow. And so, should we be contributing more? Probably we should, but it's a delicate balance between funding the capital needs the town has, keeping enough free cash on hand for things that come up, and slowly addressing this. And I don't disagree that changing the percentage we can go as much, change it from 65-35 to 50-50, but that's a decision that the select board needs to make. And last time we discussed it with them, they decided not to do that. It could be revisited in the future.
Yeah, my question is really just around the decisions of like why 100 and not 150, or not to dive into the healthcare debate at all, but sure. Just we're really trying to manage the next bond rating, and we think these are the levels that will make sure that we're still kosher.
And again, there's no hard and fast rule like on that, but again, we're trying to take the steps in the right direction. So initial contribution to the account was 25,000. Then we followed up with 50. Now we're putting in 100. If we can keep, and then the thought process was to get it up to a point where we can contribute on an annual basis a certain amount. And I think we're making strides to get there. And as time progresses, the account's going to grow. And like I said, we can take other factors into consideration and maybe mitigate some of the other items that would help offset it long term. So again, it's not something, there's no hard and fast to say, can we put 150? Yeah, this is what we're proposing. Can we put, instead of 200,000 in the stabilization, can we put 300,000 OPEB? Yes, but again, we have to be mindful of the stabilization fund. If we don't fund that kind of falls behind. So that's again a component that has to also be factored in. So we're trying to be reasonable in our approach and how we're trying to allocate the funds, because what you're not seeing is the next screen, which gets into all the capital detail of all the monies that we're going to have to spend there. So using the monies that we have, and again, who knows, this winter could be the worst winter of all times. I don't know what the snowplow is going to be for this winter, but we need to kind of be a little bit cautious, and especially how we're going. Are we in for another full lockdown? I have no idea. Could happen again, and we might need additional monies. There could be other monies that are available. A lot of unknowns, and I like to take the more cautious approach, but being mindful of all the other dynamics that are out there, especially since I'm on the phone calls with the bond rating agencies and have to answer all their questions. I'm very mindful of that.
It's always a push-pull. Do we spend money on roads? Do we spend money on other capital items? These sorts of things. And I take a similar approach to Todd. Free cash has gone from 1 million to 3 million. That's significant in Norfolk's financial picture. It's tempting to spend more this year, but knowing what's coming down the pike and wanting to also be able to tackle things that will come up next year, we're not planning to spend more than approximately half of it. So. Okay.
All right. Thank you. I think I understand the thinking. Thanks.
Great questions.
Since Todd threw me under the bus a little bit with that one, I would like to sound like broken. I would like to sound like a broken record again, and make the point that I strongly recommend that the select board revisit the retiree benefits. There is no reason why we should not have increased that the last time, especially in a year where we were making budget cuts across the board. And I would like that to be revisited again.
It might help if if some of you let them know that one-on-one.
Well, I can't speak for anyone else. Obviously.
I know, I'm just, if
really
anyone
only
else
speaking
thinks
for
so,
myself. I just think that if the state allows us to move to 50%, that's where we should be. We owe, I'm sorry, please refresh everyone's memories on what we owe for OPEB. Is it 25 million? Is that what
Just over 26 million.
Thank you. 26 million. We're talking about cutting funding for schools, but we are not willing to increase employee contributions by 5%, 10%, 15%. I mean, anything would help. We had an uproar last year over $127,000 budget cut to one piece of the budget. And yet this would increase OPEB by $2 million. This is a no-brainer. And I don't understand why it's not being considered again. It should at least be put forth by the select board to be on the warrant. Obviously, it's too late for this warrant, but I strongly feel it should be on the spring warrant.
it's not a warrant issue. It's a select board vote at a meeting.
Is that all they have to do?
That's all they have to do.
Okay. Well, I will be emailing them.
Well, and I'd also suggest that it needs to be dealt with at the state level, because it's not just a Norfolk problem. I mean,
Yeah.
You look across the whole state, and the lion's share of towns are in a similar state. That doesn't make us feel any better. But the state made a major change in who was eligible for retiree pension in 2012. They could also address this and say, you know what, you've got to work longer to get this benefit too, or something, so that it helps, lower the long-term bill to the towns.
I would just, again, one more time, just going to say we're discussing, how do we put in 25,000, 50,000, or 100,000? And like Todd said, we can make percentage changes that increase it by 2 million. That seems to be the way to go when our tax rate is so incredibly high at this point. I understand it's lower. We don't need to get into that debate, but the cost of housing is up, so therefore everyone's taxes are up. It just seems like the most logical thing. It impacts the least amount of people and yet has the most positive gain for the whole town. I'm done.
Point is well taken.
That was my soapbox. I won't bring it up again until I harass the select board and see what they're going to do. And if they still refuse, then I guess I'll continue to sound like a broken record. Every time someone complains about taxes in Norfolk, this is what I bring up to them. So,
Blythe, can you remind me, because I remember watching this in the select board last year, did they actually take a vote on it, or did they basically vote to not vote on it? I can't recall
now you got
the procedure. I believe they actually voted.
Kristen, I believe they voted to not vote on it.
Got it.
And I was in the meeting, and that would happen to be one of the meetings where I was dismissed for bringing it up. And it was around the same time that the teachers had been laid off. And yes, we know that was strategic, and they weren't actually laid off, clearly. But my argument was, we just laid off 35 teachers, and you're talking about it affects a lot of people, obviously retirees, but I believe there was only 6 of them who actually still live in Norfolk. So it affected 6 Norfolk residents who happen to also be retirees. And we just laid off 35 teachers. That was my argument. It was not well received by the select board at that time. It is a different select board now. So I would like to see it revisited.
All right.
But again, sorry, moving on. Just wanted to give some context to why I oppose putting money into OPEB. It's not that I oppose funding it. It's the process in which it's funded. That's what I oppose. But
all right, understood.
Okay. Just want to make that clear.
If Erica, if you could go to the capital detail spreadsheet, this is where the next 2 articles come from, articles 3 and 4. And
just quickly, real quick, were there any questions with regards to, because I know on the chat there was a couple with the definition of what the stabilization fund versus OPEB, or are we all good on that?
We're good.
Okay.
So this is the proposed list of capital for this fall. It is approximately half of what was requested from all the departments for next year. There are three items somewhat in the middle of the page which are suggested to be debt funded. So I'll focus on those three first. They are a replacement tanker truck for the fire department, another DPW large plow truck, and the replacement of the salt shed. We had very much hoped that on the fire truck, we would be actually proposing a replacement tanker pumper truck, replacing two trucks with one. But that was dependent on getting a federal grant that the chief and his team had applied for a second year running, and does not look like that email that we were hoping for to fund it is going to happen. So just recommending replacement of I think it's a 33-year-old truck. And he's here to speak to you about that in more detail. The dump truck is our continued plan to get some very old equipment, some couple from the 1990s out of our fleet that are very unreliable, and replace one more this year. And then the salt shed suffered a windstorm last year where the roof was damaged. We did get an insurance settlement to repair it. Matt's team did a great job getting it band-aided. I'm not sure that's the right term, back together. But it absolutely has outlived its useful life, needs to be replaced. And we are in the process with the rest of the insurance money on doing the design and the permitting through the planning board to get that approved. So those are the three projects we recommend to borrow. So let me stop there and see what questions everyone might have about those three things.
Okay.
Now, remind me. I'm sorry I didn't look this up. I could have. Didn't we do we rehabbed the dump truck last year? Or did we?
We rehabbed engine 2 in the fire department.
There was something about maybe it wasn't a dump truck, but I know it's a DPW truck. I'm sorry. I'll look and get it.
Michael, I believe the conversation was it wasn't a dump truck, but it was about whether or not there was a specific type of truck that they were able to buy versus Blair.
It was like recycling or trash or something.
Blair, I think Blair's on the call, but I think what it was it was a truck that was more expensive, but it would do more jobs throughout the year versus just being, for example, a snowplow truck. I'm forgetting the exact details. If Blair's on the call, I'm not sure if he is. I thought I saw his name. If he wants to remind us what that was about. But I don't think we rehabbed it. I think it was a conversation about whether or not to spend the money fixing the old truck, which was already on its last legs, or if it made more sense to go ahead and purchase a new one that was more expensive, but it was able to do more jobs.
And this is not Blair. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. So yeah, it's been a couple of years in a row here. So 2 years ago, we replaced the roll-off trucks in the transfer station. And then last year we replaced, we put in an order and replaced the 1990, I want to say it was a 91 or 92 tow truck. And then this year, it is to replace a 1997 plow truck that is well past its prime. So that's kind of how that all played out. And we've taken the other 97 that we have and a 2007 and replaced, essentially taken the body off of the back of those trucks and mounted standards directly to the frame. So we are certainly trying to make do with what we have the best that we can, but the 97 certainly needs to be replaced.
Okay, thank you.
Questions about the tanker truck from the chief? All right. Susan, would you like me to move on?
Yes.
So the theme of the rest of this, there was definitely some more fun projects, that people made requests for, things that were nicer to have. But myself being a little more conservative, I think the theme here is that we need to continue to invest in the equipment we depend on, and taking care of the structures that we have. And, but in a couple of places, making some targeted purchases that I think will either help us do work better, or be more proactive. So I'll run down the list and try to be quick about each one of them. And then there's folks here who can answer more details. This year, we're looking to replace 3 police cruisers, in part because they have got a lot of mileage and are really past their useful life as cruisers. But they are definitely the ones that we will replace with 120 and 130,000 miles will be very much needed to downcycle to facilities and the building department. We have had a really tough go of it this year with vehicles, a couple of vehicles that are past the ability to pass inspection, unsafe, and really absolutely not worth repairing. Air conditioning going, rotting, brakes, things like that. And a bit of bad luck with COVID pandemic supply chain issues. A new vehicle for the a fairly new vehicle that the assessors have needs a darn chip that no one can get, and stuff like that. So we've gotten a little bit behind in police cars, ergo we've gotten behind in the cars that then get downcycled. So we're looking to replace 3 this year. It's also time on a 10-year cycle to replace the firearms of the police department. And I think Chief Stone, I saw, was on the call. If there's any questions about that. Thankfully, they don't get used out in the field. Where they get used a lot is at the range and for training, and they do have a lifespan. Jaws of life. This is critical, very old equipment in the fire department, and to replace the main set and the 2 slightly smaller sets is $70,000. We're grateful to Rep. Dooley, who got us an earmark for $25,000 this year, but we need to match that with a balance for $45,000. And staying on the fire department theme, our 2 cardiac monitors.
For 1 second.
Sorry.
Hold on for 1 second. Can you make it larger? Just zoom in just a little on the. Erica?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sure you heard me.
Erica, if you go to view, the tab view.
Hang on. The Zoom is on top of, give me 1 second.
And
It might be that it's a read only or something. It's like not.
hit escape because you're in that cell.
Oh. Okay, there we go.
Go to Zoom.
Yeah. Tell me when.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
I just have to scroll up just a little, though, so we see it all. There you go. Perfect. Okay.
So the cardiac monitors, there's 1 on each ambulance. They need to be replaced. They're just beyond their useful life of I think 10 years. The monies for those will come from the ambulance receipts for appropriation account. Skipping the next 3, road work. We have made a choice to recommendation to increase this funding. We're trying to catch up. Unfortunately, not unlike OPEB or anything else, we are behind on road work. And so looking to up this from 100 to 200,000 this year to keep making progress on keeping up with our road repairs, because the longer we let things deteriorate, the more it costs to do the work later. Trough drain replacement, that is a drain in the center of the big garage at DPW that is built as part of the original building. And I think the 70s, it has failed. They've basically got pieces of I don't know what it is underneath them holding up the grate, which is unsafe. And unfortunately, as you're going to hear a couple of things I'm going to speak of and Matt can expand on, the cost of getting work done in this climate has been expensive and unpredictable. And this is our best estimate of what this work will cost for what needs to happen to replace that in the next year. Funding.
Can we pause for 1 second? I just don't want Jonathan or Kristen to forget their questions. So,
sure. Sorry, I didn't see the hands.
That's okay. Jonathan, you had your hand up first.
We can defer it. I had a question on something at the end of the list, and I raised it before we were going to go through these item by item, so I'll hold till the end.
Okay, thank you. Kristen?
I have one for the second half as well, but I do have one for the first half. I would like to hear more about the firearms replacement. What is being replaced? Like how many firearms, for example, and how many do we have currently that, what percentage are we replacing with this amount?
So, Chief.
Yeah, hey, Kristen. Yeah, what we're talking about is we have 35 weapons, holsters, and magazines that support those weapons, and we're talking about replacing them so that they're all the same. So it will be all of them, if that's answers your question. So
we have 35 pieces of firearm equipment, and we'd be replacing all 35 with their.
Right, and these are 10 going on 11 years old at this point. You can go back and look and see when we funded the last ones, but they're getting up there, and they're, as you well know, they're on the officer during all weather. They go out and they fire them for training. We're supposed to fire 3 to 4 times a year. They do, because that's what the request is from MPTC, the training division of the state. So that's what we do. And after a while, they go in and out of the holster, and just the grips start to go. If you believe it, the grips actually eat through the seats. From the people that sit down in the seat of the car, we end up having to replace material on the seats because it rips those. So, there's a lot of things that go into it. But is any other points you want to make? We're talking about either 45 or 9mm, and they're all very close in price. So what we're proposing is we'll cover it. So.
Is the idea that do we buy them all at once at that point in time, like 10 or so years ago?
Yeah, but that's not really the best way to do that, because you want everybody to have the same when they go out into the street.
Right. So this is to replace them all so that they're all the same.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Chief Stone, is there a program that would service and replace firearms the way that we discussed and we approved for the replacement of the tasers I think it was last spring? Is there a system like that in place, or is it just purchase outright and you deal with it for as long as you own them?
I'm not aware of one, but my firearms people will be tasked with that one tomorrow morning. So.
I think it's a fantastic thing that we're able to do all of them at once right now because we have extra money. I don't want to see us get into a situation, 10 years from now where we don't have the money to do it and be in a bind. So it'd be interesting to see if there's something available like that. I'm not saying that this can't go forward as is, but just, for next time or for moving forward.
So it's a good idea. I'm glad you brought it up because I will have them check tomorrow.
Okay.
I get started on checking tomorrow. But the one thing that, like the tasers, it would be nice if we could spread it out over 5 years, but I don't believe so.
Right.
And it is 24,000. So,
Yeah.
you're getting a holster, a weapon, and 2 magazines to go with it. And then we have to do a transition training.
Right.
Other than that,
I feel like they lease everything nowadays. Why shouldn't they lease these, right?
so your point is well taken. So we will check that tomorrow.
All right, good. Thank you. All right, sorry to interrupt. I didn't want them to forget anything.
Not at all.
This is Brian. Sorry, I'm calling in and don't have the video. My question is, what happens to the old firearms? Do we do like a reverse sale like we do with autos as we decommission them, or what do we do with the revenue of the old weapons when we decommission them?
Okay, that's pretty easy there. We do a trade-in, so the price that you're seeing for a replacement includes the trading deduction. So.
Excellent. Thanks.
So, any more questions? I can't see everyone on the screen, so I don't want to miss anybody.
No, I don't think anybody else has their hand up, but Jonathan, Kristen, just remind me that you have questions when we get to the end, so I don't forget. All right. Thank you.
So moving down for DPW, the hot box is a trailer mounted, I think it's been described to me as a trailer mounted furnace, which allows us to be able to purchase road patch material and keep it hot and put down a better patch than we do in the winter today. It also is much more ergonomically appropriate for employees. We've actually got an employee who's been out for 4 or 6 weeks with a shoulder injury, lifting material from a dump truck hire down to the street, so that's been a problem. We see it as an efficiency issue, and we want to move ahead and get one of those. The cemetery expansion, this was discussed at the last select board meeting, and I can send you that information later if you'd like. We have been selling burial plots at a fairly good clip in the last year or so, and we only have 42 left at the Norfolk Cemetery, and so still planning to be in the cemetery business in the future. We've identified that there is a section of that cemetery that if we could spend some money on design and clear trees and mark it out, we probably can achieve that. Work is $25,000, and those monies would come from the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund, which has just under $100,000 in it now.
I ask my question here? Is that okay? So you made the mention of the cemetery business. So if I recall a few years ago in the budget, it became clear that the actual management of the cemetery was costing the town more than we were receiving. And that there at some point was an idea of maybe we wouldn't do this in the future. We'd have to have that discussion. Did that discussion happen? And it was kind of now decided that we are going to continue to operate the cemetery for the foreseeable future. I guess it stems from the idea that if we haven't had that discussion, then we are now kind of saying, well, now we're going into it. We're going to expand and we're doing this.
I think this gives us a little more time to have the discussion. We haven't had it completely, and we've brought it up to the board, and that might be why there's been people hurrying to buy some. We're not necessarily burying them that quickly. They're simply buying plots for the future. This is going to buy us, maybe 3 to 5 years. And in that time, there isn't any more space at this or Pondville to expand after this. We will then have to decide, do we want to purchase additional land and continue to have an active cemetery, or do we want to stop having one in the future. It needs to happen in the future. This is just going to help us be prepared, because it's something we're going to want to be proactive about if we do, to identify land and then develop it.
So if we don't do this now, what is
when we sell those 42 lots, all we'll have left, and Blair can correct me if I get this wrong, all we'll have left is veterans plots. I think there's some there, and there's more at Pondville, and that will be all we have to sell. So we already don't. Thank you.
Yep. We have about 100 veterans, 100 plots left in the veterans section, and 42 regular lots, period.
but in terms of the department operating, or the folks that manage, I know it's not so necessarily to a department, but what would they be doing? Would the work to stop? Like those are filled in?
No, you're going to still continue to mow it and maintain it.
Yeah.
That's covered in the operating budget now with our grounds crew. So we always have that obligation. The money that we collect when we sell a grave or actually bury somebody goes into this fund.
Okay.
And so it just sits there. And so we're looking to spend a quarter of it. But, you know, I think your question for the future is, well, it's probably going to cost a whole lot more to buy land or unless someone chooses to donate it, that would be very nice. I tried the CPC angle. I learned from Cindy that that's not an eligible expense for CPC. I'm like, come on, it's open space. Come on. I got nowhere on that one.
Thank you.
Can I use the current price at which we sell the plots?
Oh, the night we gave Barry off. Huh.
Yes, I can get that information. I will get that information to you tomorrow. Okay, I'm more curious if the $25,000 expense for the 100 plots represents ultimately a gain, a break even, or a loss. Obviously, I realize there's more expense in maintaining and managing the cemetery than that. So I don't mean to oversimplify, but I'm just kind of curious if the obviously I think there's value in having the town cemetery beyond just the financial implications, but even so, just curious whether there's a payback period for the expansion.
I want to say it's $200 or $300 or $500.
I'm looking that up now, Blythe. I will have it to you momentarily.
All right. So that's what that's all about.
What a conversation.
Yep. Well, I mean, it's an important one for a community, and it's a tough one, and for some, but and we don't. Not that we want to spend too much time on it, but if you're not a Norfolk resident who's lived here a certain amount of time and a certain age, you cannot buy one, and most communities do that. They don't have enough space, so if you don't have a connection, you may not be buried there. So. Okay, I have an answer for you. So it's $500 for a full burial, $200 for a cremation, plus $300 for perpetual care.
Got it. Thank you.
So after that, the Council on Aging, it is a lovely building of at least 20 years old, and it is having some exterior deterioration on two sides. And the recommendation is to do to re-side it and take care of some of the other issues. And we're estimating that work to be $135,000, and Matt's on the call to talk more about that. The school has identified a 5-year plan where they need to start replacing some of their technology. And the first year of that request is FY22 for $125,000. It's about that much each year over the next 5 years. I have to defer to them about exactly what they're going to buy with it. I don't have that detail in front of me. The next one is the library exterior painting. This one, Matt and I have spent a whole lot of time on because you probably recall that we requested $90,000 last year and the town meeting funded it. So Matt went out and we gotten a quote for that, or more than one quote, I think, and with prevailing wage. Unfortunately, we also realized we needed to put together a bid and actually needed to hire an architect to make sure it was all, some of the repair work and all was designed correctly and specified correctly. So he's done that work. The architect went out and got an estimate, and unfortunately, the price is approximately 3 times what we asked for last year, which certainly was rather concerning to me, as I'm sure it is to you. We've taken an extra step, as you know, probably know, we just hired a owner's project manager for the fire station. They do a lot of public work and had just gotten an estimate for a project in an area town that included painting. So we asked them to compare the estimate they had with what Matt had, and it's very much the same. So we are requesting an additional $185,000. We're real disappointed about it, but that seems to be where the market is to do the necessary repair work on that building.
I'm just saying, I know a guy. He could probably paint it for half that.
I get it. Yeah.
Susan, that would be awesome, but we're bound by prevailing wage laws and the labor rates, and then the materials have gone up insane amounts, and the market's just driving the cost. So we can't.
So you're saying my guy, I can't bring him in under the table? It's not going to work.
If you want to donate him, that would be great. 100% donation, we could let him do it, but other than that, we can't, unfortunately, unless he wants to bid on it.
No, I was just.
I know.
Teasing.
I know.
I just started a new position where I'm managing some historic buildings and doing some exterior work like this, and I literally had a bid from last year that has now doubled since then.
Yeah,
it's total insanity, and we had contemplated waiting it out, but there's no indication that waiting is going to make the numbers any better. So it really is unfortunate.
It is. I think of all the things we could do with, $185,000. It makes me scream. But
yeah.
Well, yeah, we could fund OPEB.
Yeah. Yep. We could. So the library building, BMS stands for Building Management System Controls. As you know, last year we did significant work to the chiller, and the controls are long of tooth as well, that system depends on. And Matt can tell you more than you probably want to know. All good stuff about why we need to address those as well to make sure that the building is properly cooled or heated as needed. Facilities also has a truck that needs to be replaced. It's a 1999, if memory serves me. It was taken over by Facilities a couple of years ago from Public Works. It is in very poor condition and needed by Facilities to move things around from school to school or other buildings, plow snow on school property in the winter, all those sorts of things. It's proposed as a used truck for $55,000 with a plow, and ideally a lift gate that also makes it useful for a variety of purposes. The one we have absolutely should not be on the road any longer. It's been on the road too long. David, I see your hand up. Do you want to jump in before we go any further?
Yeah, actually, you sort of half answered it. What kind of truck is it? And did you just say it was a used truck?
So it's an F-350 that they're using now. We're really looking at this in a couple of different ways. My mindset about vehicles is that I want to spend the new dollars on the things that have the most important job or used, day in and day out for a task like a police car or a fire truck or a facility or a DPW truck. This one is definitely used, but it's not used quite as intensively as others. So two thoughts: either downcycling a different one, a slightly larger one from DPW to Facilities, and replacing the DPW one with a smaller truck, or monitoring the used vehicle market, which has been challenging, and seeing if we can find a somewhat newer truck along the size that Matt has now, an F-350, that would meet the needs.
The used car, from what I understand, the used car market is struggling right now with availability, not with pricing. Prices are not significantly less than buying new. Just keep that in mind. I'm not saying we should buy a new truck. That's not what I mean.
Yep.
I'm just saying that you have to weigh in, how many miles are on it and how old it is versus what you're paying for.
So,
so
we've had a lot of debate about this. And
if you're not saving a significant amount of money and you're decreasing the lifespan of that vehicle, then it may not make sense to buy it used in any capacity, only because of the way the used car market is right now.
Right. So, like I said, we are going to continue to work on figuring out the best way to tackle this, but knowing that not tackling it is not an option. The next item, so we're interested in starting down the road of vehicle charging stations. Matt actually had proposed, because he's identified some terrific grant programs, that we could put them all through town. And I think there's going to be a day by which we probably should. But where he and I differ is I think we got to start doing it, but I'm not ready to put them in every parking lot that we have, because right now we don't have any electric vehicles. I mean, we will, I'm sure, at some point. But this would fund 2 of them. The town's share of the cost to install and provide warranties. And I don't know all the details of this, so I'll turn it over to Matt if you have more questions. We haven't settled on where they'd go, but I think there are some locations that would be beneficial for residents and beneficial for us at some point. And so that's what this is about. And then the last one, specs and designs. We spent a lot of time talking about and, wringing our hands over things like the library painting and exterior repairs at the COA about, gee, we asked for money, we've gone out and got a quote, but this market is crazy. And there's been times where, we've done our best to find out the number, only to find out that we really had to put together a bid spec that we needed an outside expert to do. And when we finally did that, we realized that the cost was more. Maybe we're just not approaching this in the right way to be best prepared to come back and ask, you guys and the select board in the town to support these things that we need to get done. So my suggestion is we put aside some funds by which we can be proactive and go the projects that we can't buy off a state bid or some other way, be able to go and hire a firm, an engineer or an architect as needed to design, if there's work to be designed and specified, do that, go out and get a outside estimate and be very much more confident about exactly what we need and have the information to back it up. So that's the reason for the last request. We have not targeted exactly a project we'd spend it on. We just, my feeling is we need to approach it more proactively than we have in the past.
I ask a few questions.
Absolutely.
Great. My original questions were on the charging station. And I think you addressed my first question, which was just to confirm the town doesn't currently own any electric vehicles. Is that what you said? So if this would fund 2 of them, obviously I understand maybe there's a desire for the town to start procuring electric vehicles. And while I'd be in support of that as it relates to the charging stations, it's kind of important, I think, to determine who is the intended end user of these stations. Because if it's the town, you're not going to put these in the T parking lot or anything like that. You would need it at the DPW or the police station or wherever the those vehicles live, right? You're not going to want to compete with a commuter at the T lot for charging up a police car, right? So my question really is, I know you said you haven't identified where these are going, but I'd suggest to say at the very least, we need to identify, are these intended for the town for future procurement of town electric vehicles, or are these intended for the town residents and would be available in a public place? And if it's the latter, was there any analysis done on revenue that would come in from this? Are these expected to be, a fee basis, and would the town receive any of that revenue for charging fees?
Those are really excellent questions. Sure. And Matt, can you take those?
Sure. We had originally indicated facilities throughout town, both a mixed use of town charging stations and also public charging stations. Right now, there's some really great federal grants going on. So the actual cost of these units are about $85,000 a piece installed, and the Norfolk portion is about $3,500 of that. The reason we're asking to a little over $12,000 for each one is there's some requirements. If you take the grant funding, which what they do is they put its own infrastructure in, so it doesn't tie into our properties. If you take the funding, you are on the hook to maintain the units for 5 years. And by maintaining, they make it kind of like if you're buying a warranty on your car. If you do it up front, it's significantly less expensive than doing in the future by multiple times. So what we'd be on the hook for is a 5-year modem / data connection for these units. And we'd be buying a 5-year, you can have a truck run over these things and they'll be replaced, no charge to the town. So that's where the money comes up for these units. What they do is there's a management software on the units, which we get to customize to how we want to charge it. We can do it we get to go as far as how the increments of time and what we want to use to charge it. So it's all, it provides instant feedback into the MEI system for us to see what's going on, and we can have updates instantly. So we know what we pay for electricity. We know if we cover the cost of electricity and try to bring back the 12 plus, that'll be our factoring at least. And if that would be open for further discussion. But I'm thinking if we're doing 2, since the town doesn't, and it's not going to be my decision. We were talking about how to, Blythe and I've been brainstorming about, well, if we're doing this, where do we do it? To your question, and I was thinking of public areas for now, since the town doesn't have the infrastructure, but to take advantage of the amazing grants right now is so. A couple of areas I was identifying, which I think like a pond street for people watching their children play games, and can plug in. We could make it so it can be 5-minute increments or an hour increments. And also probably the public library, because I think that would be a nice center of the town location. We couldn't do it at the T lots because that's on our property. But eventually, I imagine every facility of town will have one of these in the future. And but just to kind of get our feet wet and take advantage of the funding right now is what we're trying to accomplish. And theoretically, we should be able to pay. The only cost the town should be on the hook for is if nobody ever uses this thing, we have to pay for the electricity because it'll have a meter on it. So it would consist of basically to power up the computer in it and have a street or like a night light on it, so it would be seen. So that the cost exposure for the town would be less than $10 a month for the 5 years. So $600 would be my maximum anticipated cost if these things were installed and never used after the initial purchase.
But has there been any analysis done of if it was used, and if we know how many? I mean, we should from the whatever car fees we pay, we should know how many electric cars are in town. Have you done any analysis of how much usage you'd expect to get and what the payback period would be? And the reason I'm asking this, just for what it's worth, is if we're asking the town to spend $24,000 on charging stations, we're effectively asking the taxpayers to, in some way, subsidize the operating expense, or certainly the ease of operations for electric car owners. And certainly there's a bunch, but what is it, 5% of the town has electric cars. It just seems like if we don't have a payback period on this, and it seems that, I understand there's a wonderful grant, but if we're going to be spending money with no usage plan and certainly no analysis of what this will really pay back to the town, whether we'll break even or whether we'll be out $20K, it doesn't seem like a fair ask of the residents to pay for this. And quite frankly, and maybe I'm not the one to ask. I don't have an electric car. Maybe Mike could weigh in. I know he does, but how far is Pond Street from anyone's house in this town? 3 miles, 5 miles at max? Like, it's not that we're in a location where the range of the electric vehicle is a problem. And if you own an electric vehicle, you're going to have a charging station at home. So it seems like we're in search of a solution without a problem here, especially since the town has no electric vehicles. I'd much rather support this if this was bundled with a plan of replacing cruisers with electric vehicles or fire vehicles, those sorts of things. Then it would make a lot more sense. And I think we'd have better justification for the investment and cost. But it just seems a little bit like, not to be anti-progress, but it just seems like a large expense for an extremely limited population without doing the analysis and questionable utility and usage given the nature of our.
I was going to say, basically, again, the federal government's trying to really push electric vehicles, so this is why the funding's out there. So they're basically saying it's kind of like if you build it, they will come. So that's why they're subsidizing it so largely to get the infrastructure going. It is definitely going to be the way of the future. My thought is again, I understand what you're saying wholeheartedly. My thought is to capitalize on I guess what I would consider mostly free money. Yes, there is a risk to the town, but I think it's a minimal at best. But again, this is one of those things we're trying to help the town go green, help make it for residents. I'm not fighting back against this. This is something that we're just trying to push to help the town go in the green direction and make it a benefit to the citizens.
How long does it take to make this money back? Like, is this going to turn a profit for the town, or is this just going to pay for itself and it's just a nice thing and it doesn't cost us much? Or is it actually going to turn a profit?
We can't have a turn a profit provided that people use it. And that's the $1 million question is they're trying to flood everywhere with these units. So that way it's convenient for people to buy electric vehicles. It's convenient for people to go watch their kid play a game and plug in if it has that capability. So we charge the rates that we want to charge. Obviously we don't charge an astronomical fee because then people won't use it, but you charge enough to cover the cost of the unit. And part of the modem fee is there's a software management company and they handle all the transactions virtually off of apps. And again, we get to set up the fee schedule and without having more, like Jonathan said about that it is a smaller population of electric vehicles here. It's just, this is trying to bolster encouraging them.
So, but that's what I'm saying. Is it, so it's a break even kind of thing. We charge what it's costing us. We can charge as much as you'd like to charge. It's just, I don't think you want to charge too much. So it's not attractive if they can go somewhere else and plug in for a lesser amount. But the intent is from the people in my field I've talked to, these things cover their existence, but they're not a huge profitability thing for the town. It's more of a no, I understand.
convenience. Yeah.
No, I understand that. But like gas stations, for example, they shell out a ton of money up front to put the gas station in, but then they actually it doesn't just pay for itself. The person who owns it makes money. If they didn't, there wouldn't be gas stations. So they have to make money. They can't just break even. So I think if I understand what Jonathan's trying to say is if it's turning a profit in any way, then that's great. If it's a break even thing, or if we're losing money on it and we're just doing it, you're asking taxpayers to, yes, it's only $24,000 in the scheme of things, but you're asking taxpayers to pay $24,000 for something that 100% of people are paying for, but only 2% of people are using. If it turns a profit, that's a different story. Like, toll roads, for example, they turn a profit, so therefore they put money into their, road repair fund or whatever. Are we going to be able to turn a profit where it's going to put money into something, whether it be, roads or whatever?
I would interrupt here. To be fair, there's a lot of things on here that 2% of the population use, but not everyone uses. And that's how we think about how we use our tax money, right? So I feel a little bit like if this is meant to help people move away from gas powered cars to electric vehicles, and we know that that's moving a certain direction. I don't disagree that maybe is this the year or is it another year that we do this? I think that's an open question. I think it's right for the town to move this direction at some point. And I am doing this for my day job, and this cost is what I've been hearing. I know, David, you work somewhat in this field too, if you have anything to say, David. I feel like we have people that come through our town. We have people that come to here for when their kids play soccer. So it's not just who in our town owns electric vehicles. It's who may be coming into our town, who may be going to town hall and needs to plug their car in while they're here. I know we haven't yet identified where they would go, but I don't think this is a bad thought. One thing I do know, and I wanted to ask Matt this question, is most of the rebates are predicated on the fact that it has to be open to the public. So is this number of 24,000 that type of scenario where wherever we put it, is this why we can't just put it, say, at DPW, because the rebate or the credit is predicated upon it being in a publicly accessible spot?
So when talking with Eversource and then talking with one of their preferred vendors, we can identify where we want to put the units, that it wasn't specific to a single site. So that's where I had a grand scheme of a larger amount that I'd love to do. But if we're going to do two, we can put them where we need to put them, because that was part of the original thought process, is put them at the police station. That way we can buy the cruisers that are plug-in. We'd obviously need something at the DPW, which would be purely for the town, so they can, work on them there and have capabilities. But we were not told, and I've asked, I identified the different areas. I gave them Photoshops. We did Google Earth to show them where we were putting them at. So the people that are working with Eversource, and they had no issues with all the locations they had identified. Again, the federal government's really trying to push these things out so that way they can get rid of internal combustion engines.
And I do know that this is not like a now or never thing, because I think we have more years. But I do know that for the next 2 or 3 years, these rebates will exist and then they won't. So if we think we'll ever go this direction, this is probably the time. But I do want to hear more. I do want to hear from David. I know this is kind of your wheelhouse.
Just to finish, that's the only reason I want to do this, is because there's amazing grant abilities right now. Because I imagine, and David can back this up or make it false, but I would imagine we're going to have to do it at some point, and I'd rather do it for a small cost than pay huge costs. And that's truly the reason why I don't. It's not necessarily the facilities thing. Besides, I oversee all the electric accounts. It's something that's just trying to get in when it's not going to cost us a fortune. Is where I'm at with this.
Chief Stone, are you still here?
Yes.
Have you? I'm not saying you should. I'm just asking the question. Have you thought about switching cruisers to at least some of the fleet to electric?
We've talked about the hybrid option.
I will be the first one to admit I know very, very little about electric cars. Do hybrids still have to be charged, or do they just charge from the battery itself when it runs on gasoline? I don't actually know.
Yeah, they run off both battery and gasoline, so it's not a charging situation.
Okay, so those don't need to be charged.
Possibly with the unmarked car, like, I don't know, the Chief's car, for instance. But.
Right. Okay.
They have them in so a couple of other towns near me, and I've talked to those chiefs. They do have a couple that they're trying out, so it's coming.
Okay.
I will say this too, on the fire side, I actually am investigating or looking hard into all electric fire apparatus as well. Problem with that being the standard plug or charge station that this would not work for that apparatus. It's a much more robust, larger wattage circuitry, and it wouldn't be sufficient to charge the battery system on a fire truck.
Are you speaking about the vehicles that are more normal size, or are you actually speaking about the engines, the fire engines?
Well, the engines, for sure. And then for us, when we won't be due to replace another smaller vehicle for another 2 or 3, not maybe even 5 years, but there already are options for all electric. For example, the next time I do a administrative vehicle will probably be all electric because the options are there and the cost isn't as astronomical as it once was. So there's F-150s now that are comparable, that are it's a little more expensive but not crazy. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something in the future with us being having green initiatives and having there be incentives. Even in the fire service, there's a push to reduce the carbon footprint. So all the manufacturers are making electric trucks now, either engineering or pioneering that stuff. So, I think it's definitely something that's coming for sure.
And you're saying that your fire engine, your large, your tank, like your big tanker trucks, I'm sorry, I'm not exactly sure what you call them in your world, but the big engine truck, there is a possibility for those to be electric?
Yes.
When you're ready to replace them?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
I would also, some of these vehicles becoming electric too, there's a pretty massive learning curve as far as servicing these vehicles, with having mechanics having to be certified in parts to replace vehicles that, especially in an emergency condition where fire trucks, police cars, plow trucks, and so forth that have to essentially, start in a moment's notice. They have to be reliable. So there's certainly a cost, pretty significant cost to doing all that, switching over and over.
One other comment I had is kind of also there's some massive rebates for future town purchases on vehicles. Right now, there's $7,500 per vehicle. If you were to, that they would give you incentive on top of the other incentives that are out there. If you were to buy a plug-in vehicle, they're definitely trying very hard to make, the federal government's trying very hard to switch over from internal combustion. So if we did do this, if it was working out, we started expanding, it would help out with future capital purchases for vehicles on the lighter duty at least. And this FY22, they're coming out with, half-ton pickup trucks are coming out with, and they're making a point that it would be affordable, and they're only going to continue making larger ones, as Chief was saying.
I'm sorry, but I do want to challenge that statement. Us getting 2 charging stations and putting in the library parking lot and the Pond Street parking lot, for example, is not going to do anything for us as a town to move to green or electric vehicles, because these charging stations we've invested in won't be used by town vehicles. We'll still have to build more charging stations that are purpose-built and specifically for the town at that point in time. So that's kind of where I'm going with the questions of, have we done the analysis on this and where would they expect them to be? I'm all for us having a town guideline or rule of thumb saying no more gas-powered vehicles. Every vehicle we're going to buy from now on for the town should be electric, unless there's some compelling reason not to. And let's make the investment as a town to do that. And let's put the charging stations at the DPW and at the fire department, at the police department, those sorts of things. But I don't buy that spending $24,000 to put one station in at Pond Street in the library is going to move the needle on what we're doing as a town, because these stations won't be usable for that purpose. So if we want to debate the value of getting charging stations available for public use, let's do that. If we want to debate the value of getting charging stations for town use, let's do that. But I don't think we can go with this wishy-washy. We're not sure what we want them for and where we want them to be and what the intent of these things are going to be. I would suggest we do the analysis of where are they going to live? What's the constituency at which they're going to serve? Is it the public and the residents, or is it town vehicles? And if it's going to be the public, what's the payback period? And there may not be one. We may lose money, and we still may determine there's value in us to do this for the message it sends and the push towards green, vehicles and those sorts of things. But at least let's be upfront with everyone of we're going to spend $24K and we hope to recover X from that. We will or we won't break even. I think just asking for $24K and then just say, well, let's cross our fingers and see what happens is not a fair ask of the residents for the spend, especially because very few people in town will benefit from this.
I'd like to ask a question or make a statement or whatever, since Kristen's waiting for my statement. So I actually sort of tend to agree with Jonathan in a lot of ways. I worked for the city of Somerville, which 8 years ago had a lot more electric vehicles than I thought. And when we got a grant to do this, it was part of our Green Communities grant. We spent a lot of time not figuring out where to put it. And it took us years to get them in place because of exactly the concerns you have. At one point, they ended up putting them at City Hall with the idea that people visiting the City Hall could plug in. And then, the assessor's vehicles parked there and plugged there. They had electric vehicles, so they were not available for residents. There is that tension between whether they're publicly available or whether they're not. There is a lot of money out there for it, but I do think that we have to, before we ask for the money, I think it would be better to have a sense of where they go. The commentary about what the chief's saying, Chief Kenny's saying about the commercial vehicles and large public safety vehicles and stuff are going to have a completely different charging setup than a lot of the smaller stuff, is my understanding. I know there's people on here who might know more about this. I'm not an expert in this field whatsoever. I just know that the siting of these things is where you really run into problems. I shouldn't say problems, issues. Some of the debates we had were, do we let people charge for free or do we, subsidize it? And that's you see that all over the place in downtown Boston now. Some of them you're paying a regular meter fee, and some of you're paying a regular meter fee plus the electricity you're pulling from the system. All of those questions are going to need to be answered prior to purchasing these things, and maybe it's a little premature.
I just want to jump in and say I really have appreciated this debate tonight. It's one thing to get excited about a topic and what you possibly could do, and it's very, very helpful to hear your questions and gives us some food for thought about whether we have this on the final list for this town meeting or whether we go back to the drawing board and do a little bit more homework.
I do think the chicken and the egg question that Matt's raised is an important one. Mm-hmm. That putting them in before you have before they're full, before you can't get access to one, is an important step. I just think that we need to think a little bit more about where they go. And some of the issues around revenues and things like that too.
Yeah, well, your questions will mirror what people ask at town meeting. So, very much appreciated.
Hey, this is Brian. I got a question if we have a moment and we're ready to move on. Okay. We're talking about the Council of Aging building and architectural changes that needed some structural repairs and the siding and the painting. If we're re-siding, are we actually re-siding it and making a choice like vinyl that would be longer term, or are we going to do the structural repairs and then just paint and replace only the siding that's needed to be replaced? Thanks.
So
I can answer that.
Yes, the plan is the former, and Matt can give you those details.
Yes, I'm a large fan of vinyl siding. It does cost more than painting, but it lasts multiple times longer. And the intent of this project is when you pull up to the senior center, it looks aesthetically pleasing in the front, but the back and the side, which are very difficult, have a lot of rot happening. So my intent is instead of opening up a can of worms, basically encapsulating it for the most part, if it can be, if there's no, the wood on there now is in poor condition, and once you start opening it up, it gets worse. So I'm hoping to just encapsulate the building and leave it as it is, and put vinyl siding on, and that should buy us 35, 40 years before we have to talk about it again.
Awesome. Thanks.
So Susan, I think we've covered everything, but we're happy to take any more questions that anybody has or follow up with more information.
Okay. I think that, I'm speaking for everyone. I would like to, I don't think we need anyone to present, but if you can find out exactly what is involved with the technology for the schools and the 125,000, you can just let us know. I don't think we need to hear from the school or anything like that. You can just ask and they can let us know. I think Chief Stone was, I don't think it's going to be an option for this time around, but he was going to look into seeing if there is a program for replacing firearms. And I think, I'm not sure. I'd like to hear from the board on whether or not they want, more conversation on the electric vehicle money, and they want to put a hold on it and wait and get some more information, or do they feel comfortable letting it go forward for the fall town meeting?
If I may, I'd like to suggest that I need to talk to the select board about this too next week. Mm-hmm. And while we can start doing the work internally, we could wait and choose to do this in the spring. If it just needs a little more work, then we can really do thoughtfully between now and November 9th. Mm-hmm.
I think there's personally, from what I'm hearing from the board as well as myself, I think that, clearly we all agree that the world is going to move towards electric vehicles. It's just that no one knows how quickly that's going to happen. And we want to make sure that if we're taking advantage of the grants, that we're taking advantage of them in the right way and in the best way possible. So I think that there's probably some questions that need to be answered if we want to move forward with it for the fall. And if you want to wait for some questions to be answered, I think that would also be okay with most people.
That's great. We understand.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for any of our experts that are on the call this evening?
So Susan, I just wanted to get back to the school budget request of $125,000 for technology. Mm-hmm. It's comprised of 4 different items. One is for a phone system replacement of $30,000. One is for surveillance camera system of $60,000. District Arrowhive access point upgrade of $17,000, and a switch room relocation over at the HOD of $18,000. That should total out to $125,000.
What's a switch room? You mean like changing a room from being a classroom to something else, or vice versa?
I can respond to that because
the switches.
I'm involved with that. There's the Yellow Day was kind of built before technology, this type of technology. So we have switches in the boiler room, which is very hot, and it's not a good environment for this electronics to be in at all times. Because during the winter time, it's extremely hot, so it prematurely dates those. But there's also we have right now our main switch room that has been pieced together over the years is in a shared classroom, which we have encapsulated, but we're trying to bring the switches out of the boiler room to the area that we've designated as our main hub. So, and what's there now is very antiquated and undersized. So that's my understanding what the tech department's trying to do with that. And this is a 5-year ask. So they've come up with a 5-year of trying to update the technology that's all very old and very used.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I had a question about the $30,000 for, I think, was it cameras? Security cameras? Is that what that was?
Camera system is 60,000.
There was something else after that. Okay.
Phone system for 30.
Sorry, this is the bigger one, the 60,000. Can someone explain what that is and why it needs replacing? Please.
That's the Freeman Kennedy is looking to, I guess, upgrade the surveillance camera system that they have over there to this newer technology, which would be the $60,000.
Okay, thank you.
It's also the cameras. The cameras are original to the building. They were procured during construction, so they kind of predate going live. They're again at the end of they're having a large amount of failures. I get to see it all the time, and we have cameras dropping. So the intent is to upgrade the system so it's more stable, and to be able to use it for the footage that we use it for all the time.
Yeah, I just know with that kind of price tag, people will ask details. So thank you for bringing them up today.
Are these actual costs or estimated costs?
I can't speak fully on that, but I believe they're estimated costs. I know the tech department's very thorough with their research, and the good thing about the school side is they have E-rate on a lot of stuff, which is amazing because if the town was asking for the same thing, we pay a lot of it. We can pay a completely different fee. Everything's subsidized for the elementary. But I know they've done the tech director over there is extremely detail oriented. So I feel comfortable that those numbers are very accurate.
Okay. Jonathan, Brian, anybody? Anything else?
Forgot Bueller.
Nothing for me.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Blythe.
Great. So just to move on to a couple of things I think are on our list to cover tonight. I'll pass over Article 5 and 6. I know you're going to talk to CPC next week. You already actually did see Article 7, which is the cemetery expansion. It is its own article, even though it shows up on this sheet as capital, because it's a separate vote because it's from the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund. It needs a town meeting vote on its own. So that's how we'll handle that.
So you're going to take the money out of this to put into that fund, and then you need a vote to take the money from the fund to use it.
The money's already in the fund. We're just going to, that will be the funding source in Article 7.
Okay. Gotcha.
Sorry if that's confusing.
No, I know. I just wanted to make sure I understood it.
Yep, absolutely. I'll pass over Article 8. I know Rich McCarthy will handle that next week on the 2 road acceptances. So I thought if it's okay with you, I'd touch on Articles 9 and 10. These are 2 solar projects that we have been pursuing. The first one, Article 9, is to do a ground-mounted canopy system and a roof-mounted solar system at the police station that I know Matt knows a lot about. We've been toying about whether this could go forward because there's some situations where if you have debt on a public building, you can't then lease that property for something like this, but town council seems to be of the opinion that we will be able to do it and reap the benefits of that. And then Article 10 is to lease out the area around the water tank that is off of Sharon Avenue for a ground-mounted solar array and receive rent tax revenue for a pilot for the value of the equipment, a 1.5 cent credit on our electricity costs per kilowatt hour, and building a road for us to get from the tank over to Pond Street. So that's very high level about both of them, and we can go into those in more detail.
David, weren't these the ones that you had some questions, I think, for Andy on? Is that right?
I asked if Andy had been involved, which was the Energy Committee had been involved. A quick question though, Blythe. I'm looking at the language for number 9.
Sure.
It says ground mounted. Is that the canopy? Or you said something about a canopy and I'm trying to figure out where.
All right, I got them mixed up. Number 9 is the water tank. I'm sorry, mistake that. Since they're both off of Sharon Avenue, I get them mixed up. So Article 9 is only ground mounted around the tank area. That's not going to impact the use of that.
And then the number 10 is a canopy.
Canopy and possibly canopy and roof mounted together.
All right. And as before, this would be some sort of lease power purchase agreement kind of deal?
For both of them.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's how they are. Definitely for the first one.
Although, never mind. I was just thinking out loud. Never mind.
That's okay.
I'm answering my own question in my head. So
we put this out. We put out an RFP for the water tank. We were approached by NextGrid, who's doing has two parcels off of on Pond Street that they are working with, and they've got arrangements with those property owners. And they actually approached us because they'd like to make the array as big as they can. So we said, well, let's put out an RFP and follow that process. And they responded with per year annual lease payment for the land, which would go up by about 3% a year, to build us the I'm not sure I'd call it a road, but more of a very nice driveway with security access to be able for police cars to get out to Pond Street faster than they do now, and to pay us the say a pilot or tax revenue from the equipment value of the equipment that's out there, and then the 1.5 cent per kilowatt hour savings, which we've calculated to be worth. It's about $37,000 a year, what we use today.
Follow-up question on that. And it's been a few years, but how much of the electricity of the town's usage is covered by the system at the dump? Because I know that there was a period of time where it was very close to covering 100% of the town's use. Now, we've obviously built at least one new building since then, the police station, but are we?
I know Matt knows the answer to that one.
I don't have an exact figure, but I would say it's only about 65 to 70% of the town's use is that covered by that at this point.
Okay.
So, we haven't finished negotiating this with them. We're still working on that. There's also seems like there's some changes in how the state likes to see communities approach pilot agreements for the equipment versus personal property, taxing them on the value. So we're working our way through that, and pushing back on the proposer of what things are really worth. And I think that's going in the right direction. So it would be a win-win for the Water Enterprise Fund, because the rent would go, because it's on that land, would go to that fund. The other monies would benefit the larger general fund. And then, Matt, do you want to tell everyone a little bit more about the police station plan?
Sure. Obviously, that building is a large consumer of electricity. It was designed to be efficient, and one of the ways they go efficient now is it's called VRF HVAC systems. So it's all electric except for the satellite port, which has some natural gas infrared heaters. So in order to try to make it less of a cost to the town and to continue, because we are a green community, we've tried to identify how to put solar on that facility, and to put solar on the facility so it has a twofold: one to help out with the operating costs, but also one of the main goals of the station, that wasn't affordable, was to put carports up. So if we could have the canopies, it would help protect all the vehicles not in the inside, and so it provided cover for the outside vehicles, and so we're trying to almost encapsulate most of the parking lot with the design. Obviously, it's in its infancy, so it has to go to the planning board. But our intent is to try to make the public side have a canopy over, and where the police operation side also have canopy, and then do it with a PPA, so it's no out-of-pocket cost to the town. They want a 25-year agreement because the canopies are very expensive to make or to install. And it would overproduce what the facility needs. So it would be net metered, and we could apply the excess to other accounts to help offset the costs around town. This is the plan.
Doesn't it also help our green community efforts to reducing our energy because we're creating some?
It does. It's all these, everything that we're doing is helping reduce our carbon footprint, which is the ultimate goal. So yes, by making our energy there, it does help offset procuring energy from the grid. And also, Andy Becknowski was on this phone call, and he is the resident expert on that. So he might be able to offer some more in depth on that aspect of it.
Andy's off the call. I can't see him anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking to you through my phone, so I don't see who's.
I think he must have got off the call.
Gross, dude.
Are you there, Andy? No.
But it's a no cost to the town. It will be a savings. It's not an astronomical savings, but it's helping the town continue going forward green on the green community path, and it will reduce our operating costs.
Okay.
So I don't think I have anything else to cover, Susan, but I'm certainly happy to answer whatever I can.
Okay. Erica, can you put the rest of the warrant up for us?
Yep, 1 second. Was there another sheet you wanted me to share?
You wanted to put up the actual warrant. It's the
Sure, 1 second.
yeah.
Some stuff in your hair, everybody. Point it out. It's right there. Hey, hi.
That better?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could scroll down, Blythe, I think you just went over 9 and 10.
Yeah.
And 11 is going to be the planning board. 12 is going to be the board. So Rich will do those. So if you could, Erica, if you could make a note that Rich is going to handle Article 8, 11, and 12 next week.
And 13.
8, 11, 12, 13.
Okay.
13 says select board, but asking me to talk in depth about stormwater would not get you very far. Blair may be able to help a little bit with it, but it's really Rich and Barry, the deputy director over at DPW. They're the ones who are the subject matter experts.
Okay. And 13 is all we have, right?
That's it.
Okay. So we have CPC coming in 2 weeks, correct? And planning board coming next week. Is that right, Erica?
Yes.
Okay, and then we'll be finished after that? Correct? Is that everything? Yep, okay. So you still need to present to the select board to launch the warrant in, correct, before we
Right, so I'm gonna go over the same capital with them on Tuesday that you've seen. And just make sure we're all in alignment about these things. And I don't expect they'll make any other changes to the warrant. Said the only other thing that was comment I've received was from Jay that we didn't need the article for committee reports.
Okay.
While I have you all, I was in touch with him the other day. He is suggesting October 25th, which is a Monday at 10:30 in the morning for a moderators meeting by Zoom.
Okay. All right. So I think that's everything. Does anyone have any questions on either the capital items or the energy stuff that Blythe went over this evening? Because if we do, before we go to vote, we want to, I mean, we're not voting tonight, but before we vote, we want to have all of our questions answered. Is everyone all set? Is there anything anyone would like for Blythe to get back to us on?
So it's Brian. I guess I'm not tracking on the energy stuff. Are there, for either of those, are there town funds that have to be expended at any point? I think I heard there's no upfront money. It'll save us energy and operating expenses, and we get everything in the world for free. And I'm trying to figure out why they do this unless they're taking, if there's that much energy left over for them to sell. Is there, I guess let's just answer it concisely, is there outlays from the town in this budget or other that we are approving?
There are no outlays from the town to do either project. And I can tell you from the water tank one that we were, they reached out proactively to us because they want to build the biggest array possible for whatever agreements they have. And the state's SMART program to incentivize these is still valuable, and so these companies are chasing where they can build these things, and we happen to be in the right location with the water tank.
Brian, Brian, the companies usually, they'll offer a deal to whoever they're leasing from. They end up owning all the tax credits, which obviously a town entity can't use the tax credits. They also, I'm assuming, they get the SMART incentive rather than us, since they're the utility account holder and they're selling us the energy or something. Because it's a power purchase agreement, which means we basically make money off the lease and reduced energy costs, and they make their money off the tax credits and the state incentive.
All right. Okay, that makes sense. And we couldn't do it ourselves anyway because we can't make.
Well, we can, and we could actually. There's a way. But then we have to manage it.
Yeah. Okay.
We own it at that point, and we own all the problems. And there's there's arguments on both sides. We had the same argument when we put the one on the dump. Oh, I'm sorry, the landfill.
Okay, thanks. That's super helpful. That's the only question I had.
Okay. So if that's it, and nobody else has any questions, then we just need to approve the minutes from the last meeting so that we stay on top of everything. Kristen and Erica, are you ready for that?
No, sorry, I have to jump off. But no, I got them on Sunday, and I wasn't sure if that was cutting it too close to the 40-hour cutoff, so I did not send them through.
You don't.
Okay.
You don't need to send them through. You just need to review them and present them to us.
Okay, I did not do that because I didn't think I was in the right span of time allowed. So I have them. I will have them for the next meeting to approve.
We have 2 meetings to get it done, Susan. So we're in good shape.
Okay. All right. So Kristen, next week on Wednesday, we'll do the last meeting as well as tonight's meeting so that we stay on time with everything.
So I can bring them to the meeting, or how do you guys have a chance to review the minutes?
You go over them. I'm sorry, David, you go ahead. You did the job.
I'm sorry. Your job is to review them and you're approving them you're approving the context of the minutes for the board. You're presenting us with your approved minutes. There is no discussion about further review. You're just presenting them to us.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
I think you just read through whatever Erica writes up, and then you say, yes, this sounded right. You say, we're good to go to approve them. We make a motion, we approve them, and then you sign them and drop them off at town hall. Okay, great. Yep, we will be good for next week. I literally just didn't know the time frame that was allowed this time, and now I do. Okay. Yep. Okay, so next week we'll do tonight's meeting as well as the meeting from 2 weeks ago. Yes. And those I do have. Erica did send them over. Okay. They're already ready. Okay, great. And Erica, the agendas are all set for the next 2 meetings with who's coming?
Yep. We have Rich is coming next week, and then Cindy from CPC is coming the following week.
Okay. And then we should be good to go to vote the meeting after that. Will that still keep us on time, Blythe? I'm sorry, let me pull up my calendar. Let me just make sure. So we have the 6th, the 13th. If we vote on the 20th, on October 20th, are we still within the window? Blythe? Is she here?
Blythe, you're muted.
Sorry about that. If you can get your write-ups to Erica really quick after that, we'd like to get it to the printer on the 26th. So
yeah, we usually, if we vote on Wednesday, we usually call for all of the write-ups to be sent to Erica or me or whomever by the 24th, by Sunday.
Perfect.
So that gives them, 2 days plus the weekend to get it done. So on the 20th, we will vote on everything as well as assign all of the write-ups that evening. And we should be good to go. So we have 3 meetings. This is an easy fall, right? Only 5.
I'll make it up to you in the spring, promise.
I'm sure you will. Okay, well, I think that's it, everybody. Since we're not voting on meetings, we'll just postpone that. So if there's no further business, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.